Hello, YouTube!
I'm back!
Boy, did I miss you guys. I've been working round the clock, and I'm happy to be back and making some more content for you guys to enjoy. This is actually a special episode because it's going to be my first response video to a subscriber and a longtime friend. Now, he was watching my episode on parenting and was a little surprised by it. Mainly this part. Might I suggest, and you can say no, try spankings. The fact that I was, and still am, pro spanking or corporal punishment. Now, we had a great discussion and he left me with some awesome resources to look into on the effects of physical punishment, and I made it a challenge to only use the sources he gave me to see if I couldn't come up with a good rebuttal. Now, as always, this isn't a bashing or an ownage video. We are just debating opinions, and I still respect and love this guy, as I'm sure he respects and loves me. With that being said, though,
Come on, get spanked.
so let's jump right into it, shall we? Now, I read all of these papers, and I'm going to be focusing on an article found on the NCBI website called The Physical Punishment of Children, Lessons from 20 Years of Research, and a journal found at the Ministry of Social Development's website on the state of research of the effects of physical punishment by Ann B. Smith. Now, there was also an article on the American Psychological Association, but I'll only be dipping my toe in that one. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up, kiddies. First, we need to ask the question, what corporal punishment is, and how does it differ from abuse? In the journal by Ann Smith, we get the clearest definition out of all the resources I was given. She separates discipline from corporal punishment as she says, quote, "Physical or corporal punishment is the use of force to cause pain but not injury for the purpose of correction or control," while later stating that, quote, "Discipline is the guidance of children's moral, emotional, and physical development, enabling children to take responsibility for themselves when they are older. It involves teaching children the boundaries of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in their family and in society."
Are you sure about that?
Well, I'm certainly not, because she then states, quote, "Discipline can be positive, for example, praising the child for doing something or for stopping doing something inappropriate, or it can be negative, for example, smacking a child for doing something wrong." But wait, isn't that last one a, to use your own words, use of force to cause pain? I looked up the word discipline and oh, what's that right there as the second definition? Punishment? So maybe you can have corporal punishment and discipline at the same time. Moreover, she goes on to state that, quote, "Positive discipline normally involves helping children to understand why certain behavior is
Unacceptable!
and other behavior is acceptable. Negative discipline focuses on doing what you are told in order to avoid something unpleasant. The whole because I said so idea. While that might sound nice, that isn't really a descriptive of physical or non-physical punishment. The whole idea of do this because I said so isn't isolated to corporal punishment. So essentially what we can come away with is that one of them is a specific descriptive, discipline, that can occur in the other, corporal punishment. So now that we have a better understanding of what corporal punishment is, now we need to discern the difference between punishment and abuse. Is it really all that bad? Corporal punishment, not abuse. Abuse is bad. That's really bad. But there is evidence that there may be some good in corporal punishment. In a study done by Professor Robert Larzolier, cool name by the way, and a colleague, they discovered something interesting. Quote, "In a meta-analysis of 26 studies, Larzolier and colleague found that an approach they described as conditional spanking led to greater reductions in child defiance or antisocial behavior than 10 of 13 alternative discipline techniques, including reasoning, removal of privileges, and time out. He even gives a definition of conditional spanking. Quote, a disciplinary technique for 2 to 6-year-old children in which parents use 2 open-handed swats on the buttocks only after the child has defied milder discipline. So apparently 1 or 2 is just fine, but after that,
it's time to stop.
Anne Smith would disagree with that statement though, as she goes on to state that although there are many studies that indicate positive outcomes, such as Dr. Larzalier's, they are mostly correlational and not causational. So what is correlation and causation? Well, in short, correlation says this has a tendency to be prevalent when something happens, but it might not be the cause of the event. For example,
Sonic's Last One-Night Stand by Hamo Hamster. One autumn afternoon, Sonic the Hedgehog was taking a nice walk in the forest. He and Tails were going to get married in 2 days, so
Hey, stop! Why?
now Sonic was not the cause of my discomfort for this fanfiction, although him being in one makes me assume that I might get pretty uncomfortable, ergo correlation. It's just that Sonic fanfiction is cancer. Sonic is not the cause of discomfort. It's all the fanfiction surrounding him. Ugh. Moving on. She goes on to state that there is evidence that there is causality for negative effects from corporal punishment. Now, I could go through all the evidence, but my first thought while going through all that evidence was, hey, I'm a product of corporal punishment, and I turned out fine. Well, Smith has an answer for that all the way at the bottom of her journal. Quote, one very frequently used everyday argument in favor of corporal punishment is from people who say, I was spanked and I am okay. Strauss, 1999, points out that people who say this may be among the lucky ones who were not adversely affected by corporal punishment. Corporal punishment does not guarantee a harmful effect.
Okay, hold up!
You said you have studies that show evidence of corporal punishment causing harmful effects, but you then say that there is no guarantee that corporal punishment leads to harmful effects?
What?
You can't say that you have causal evidence, then immediately refute it. I mean, don't take my word for it. Look at the paragraph right below in the section marked, What is the evidence? Anne Smith references a major literature study by Elizabeth Gershoff done in 2002 as her evidence for causal effects. Yet in a piece on the case against spanking on the American Psychological Association, they quote Gershoff saying, and I quote, unfortunately, all research on parent discipline is going to be correlational because we can't randomly assign kids to parents for an experiment. Well, which is it? Is it a cause or a correlation? In my opinion, it seems as though if you have somebody saying that they didn't have this effect, then that might just be correlational. Oh, but rational! I hear most of you typing on your Dorito-stained keyboards. Maybe there's a lot of correlation with harmful effects and physical punishment. And to that, I'd ask a simple question. Why? Why do we see such a huge correlation between harmful effects and physical punishment in all of the studies that are in these resources? Well, let's take a gander at what they see as corporal punishment and some of their research. When I went back and looked at all the research, there is one major thing in common that essentially boils down to,
I can feel your anger. I am defenseless. Take your weapon. Strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey towards the dark side will be complete.
In the APA's study, one professor is quoted saying, "People get frustrated and hit their kids." NCBI states that a study done to boys in grade 1 showed results of increased aggression and misbehavior after watching a video of a boy being yelled at, shaken, and then spanked with a paddle for misbehaving. But the most telling of all was a testimonial of a mother in a study from New Zealand. Quote, "My parents were very strict. I assumed everyone was being brought up the same. You will do as you're told and you won't question. My mother would use the wooden spoon. My father was more into bare hands. There were other things. Go to your room, miss out on something. If you were naughty, they almost took it as if it was a personal affront. They just seemed so offended by it, like you were insulting them. I was basically very good and I was hit frequently. I'm sure through being smacked, it made me do silly things without thinking. It made me go out and do the same thing again, what I'd been smacked for. The message I got from them when they hit me was not, 'What you're doing is bad, don't do it again.' The message I got was, 'We don't love you.'" End quote. That's just heartbreaking to hear. But there are key words there that allude to an overall message that we can glean from these stories. Frustration, anger, and a lack of love is written all over these. Look at that last part again. The message she got was, "We don't love you." In my previous video on parenting, one of my major issues was on the why. Why are you choosing this form of discipline? Remember what I said in my previous video. The fact that they're in an emotional black hole for about 20 minutes. Obviously, don't discipline your child based off of your emotion. Is it the spanking that's the issue? Or is it the emotion driven based off of the offense? I'd say it's the emotion. Why? Let me tell you about how my father handled spankings. When we were really disobedient, he wouldn't immediately spank us. He'd tell us to go to our rooms. And we'd sit there and we knew that the spankings were coming. So we had time to think about why we were getting spanked. But not only that, he explained later on that that was a time for him to calm down too. Sometimes we did ridiculously crazy, insane, stupid things. Sometimes it was things that would cost a lot of money for him. Of course he would get angry. Of course he would be upset. But he didn't ever want to discipline us out of anger. He wanted us to learn what we did was wrong. So he took time to control himself so that he wouldn't hurt us out of anger, but only spank us. And then guess what afterwards? He'd take us all to bed, he'd read us a story, he'd tell us that he loved us, he'd hug all of us and kiss us, and then tell us goodnight. If it was something that happened in the morning, guess what? We never got time out. We were never removed from the family. We all stayed together. And I felt the love of my father after every single spanking. I knew he cared about us. That is how you discipline a child. By giving them love and correction at the same time. Giving yourself time to calm down before the punishment and not isolating your child away from the family as a punishment. If corporal punishment means striking your kid in anger, I wholeheartedly agree we should end it. But I think the more pressing issue is with the intent and the heart of those handing out the punishments. I could be wrong about this, but in my personal opinion, the blows that deal the most damage are the mental ones. Anyway, that's all I got to say about this topic. I want to give a huge shout out to my friend. I still love you to death, whether we disagree on this topic or not. And hopefully you have a better, view of why I think the things that I think. And hopefully this was entertaining and informative to all of you out there. Tell me what you think in the comment section down below. I've got a lot more content to bring out, so I will see you guys next time. This is Rational the Radio, signing off.